Welcome to this deep dive. And you know, this topic is really interesting. It's all about the power of not reacting. We all have those moments where something just pushes our buttons, right? And this deep dive is, well, it's about exploring how to maybe hit the brakes on that reaction, you know? We're looking at a blog post and a couple of YouTube videos he sent over. And I've got to say, there's some seriously thought-provoking stuff here.
Yeah, it's really about taking control back, isn't it? Instead of letting our emotions just run the show.
Exactly. And the blog, it starts with this Buddhist concept, the first and second arrow. Have you come across this
Oh
before?
yeah, the first arrow, that's like the initial tough
Yeah.
situation, the stuff that just happens, right? It's unavoidable. But then there's that second arrow, and that's the one we inflict on ourselves as our reaction, and that's what this deep dive is all about.
Okay, so let's break that down a bit. The blog, it tells the story about, get this, an airport cleaner, and this guy, he's like a master class in not reacting.
Right. Picture this. Passengers rushing through, totally stressed, and they knock over this like perfectly stacked pile of trash he's just collected.
And his reaction, he just calmly carries on cleaning. No drama, no big sighs. He just keeps going.
It's like he's seen it all before, right?
Yeah.
And the blog, it suggests this is a regular thing for him, like a constant stream of these first arrows.
Yeah.
But he's made this choice not to fire back with the second arrow, the negativity.
He's mastered the art of not letting things get to him, and it reminds me of something you see in both the blog and those YouTube videos. It's not stress itself that's the problem, it's how we react to it.
They even quote Hans Selye in one of the videos, the whole grandfather of stress research.
Yeah.
And he said, it's not stress that kills us, it is our reaction to it.
That's a pretty powerful statement. So we've got these everyday things, right? Deadlines, disagreements, you burn the toast in the morning, and our bodies, they react in these like predictable ways.
Right. Your heart starts racing, maybe your muscles tense up. It's that classic fight or flight response kicking in.
Exactly. But here's the thing, most of the stuff we stress about these days, it's not actually life or death, even if it feels like it sometimes.
But our bodies, they still react like we're facing down some, I don't know, some massive threat, like in prehistoric times. And if that stress response is triggered constantly, well, it takes its toll.
So that's where this power of not reacting comes in. It's about sort of short-circuiting that stress response, finding a different path for our minds and bodies.
One of the YouTube videos even goes so far as to call it the only spiritual life you need.
Okay, that sounds pretty intense. But I think I get the gist. They're saying real peace comes from, like, mastering our reactions to the world, not from trying to control everything external.
Right. It ties in perfectly with that Buddhist idea of the two arrows. We've always got a choice in how we respond, even if it's just a tiny pause, a moment to become aware before we react. And that pause, even if it's just a second, it can be incredibly powerful.
So it's not about becoming some kind of emotionless robot.
Right?
It's more about choosing to respond thoughtfully instead of just reacting on impulse.
Exactly. And one of the most interesting arguments these sources make is that it's not just about feeling better. Calmness actually makes us better at solving problems.
Oh, really? How so?
Well, think about it. When we're not all caught up in our emotions, we can think more clearly, right? We see the bigger picture. And we're making decisions from a place of logic instead of like just fear or anger.
That makes a lot of sense. So how do we actually, like, incorporate this into our lives? We're not all going to become monks or anything, right?
Thankfully not. And that's where these YouTube videos get really practical. They talk about things like mindfulness, breathing exercises, even this thing called reframing negative thoughts.
Okay, let's break those down a bit. Mindfulness, you hear that word everywhere, but what does it actually mean in practice?
Basically, it's about paying attention to right now, this present moment, without judging. You notice your thoughts, your feelings as they come up, but you don't get all swept away by them.
So say I'm stressed about a deadline, right? Instead of going down that rabbit hole of anxiety, mindfulness would be about acknowledging the feeling, but not letting it, like, take over.
Exactly. And the beauty of mindfulness is you can practice it anywhere, at any time. While you're walking, eating, even just waiting for the coffee to brew. It's about bringing your attention to this moment, however brief it might be.
It's like hitting pause on that constant stream of thoughts, right?
Exactly. And speaking of hitting reset, what about those breathing exercises? Those seem pretty straightforward. Do you have any like go-to techniques?
Let's talk about that 4-7-8 one. Is that a good one to start with?
That's a great one. Super easy to remember, and it's really effective. But there are loads of others out there. Box breathing, alternate nostril breathing, even just taking a few slow, deep breaths can make a huge difference.
It's amazing how something so simple, like breathing, can have such a big impact.
Well, our breath is directly connected to our nervous system, right?
Yeah.
When we're stressed, our breathing gets all like short and rapid. It's like our body's alarm system going off.
Yeah.
But when we consciously slow down our breath, we're basically telling our nervous system that it's okay to chill out.
It's like speaking our body's language, telling it to calm down.
Exactly. And it's a tool we always have with us.
Right. So we've talked about calming the body with breathing, but what about those racing thoughts? That's where this reframing negative thoughts comes in, right?
See.
It sounds really powerful, but I don't know, a little vague, to be honest. How does that work in practice?
Reframing is all about challenging those automatic negative thoughts that pop into your head. You know, those I'm going to fail, or they don't like me, or this will never work kind of thoughts.
Those are the worst, like a broken record in your mind.
Exactly. But here's the thing. We don't have to believe everything we think, right? Reframing is about choosing to see things from a more positive angle, or at least a more neutral one.
So instead of saying to myself, I'm going to totally bomb this presentation, I could reframe that as, okay, I'm a little nervous, but I've prepared well, and I'm just going to do my best.
Exactly. It doesn't mean pretending you're not nervous. It's more about shifting your focus to those more helpful aspects of your preparation, your intention to do well.
It's like being your own cheerleader instead of your own worst critic.
Love that analogy.
Yeah.
And, you know, we often talk to ourselves in ways that we would never speak to someone we care about. Reframing is about, you know, giving ourselves that same kindness and compassion.
So it's not about pretending everything's perfect. It's about shifting that inner voice from self-criticism to self-compassion.
Beautifully put. It's about remembering that we're all a work in progress, right?
Yeah.
We're learning, we're growing. Yeah, we're going to mess up along the way. And that's okay.
It's about embracing those imperfections, those moments where we trip up a bit and seeing them as part of the journey.
Exactly.
Like we have more control than we realize, even when it feels like life's throwing us curveballs left and right.
Exactly. And it's not about, like, pretending we don't have emotions, right?
Right.
Those are a natural part of who we are. It's more about that space between feeling and reacting and making a choice about how we respond.
So how do we actually bridge that gap? Because those YouTube videos, they do a great job of explaining why not reacting is so powerful. But I'm curious about the how part, the actual steps we can take.
Well, they do offer some pretty practical techniques, remember. Mindfulness, breathing exercises, and reframing those negative thoughts.
Right. But how do we actually use those tools in the heat of the moment? It's one thing to know about them, but another to actually put them into practice when things get stressful.
Absolutely. And one thing they emphasize is that not reacting doesn't mean you become passive or like totally unresponsive. It's more about choosing a different kind of response, one that comes from a place of, awareness, being present.
So it's not about being a pushover. It's more about cultivating an inner strength that helps us handle whatever comes our way without being controlled by our reactions.
Exactly. And like building any kind of strength, it takes practice. The more we do it, the stronger it gets.
Okay, so let's dive a little deeper into those techniques, shall we?
Let's do it.
Mindfulness first. So how do we realistically bring that into our busy lives?
So mindfulness is all about tuning into right now, this present moment, and doing it without judgment, just noticing our thoughts and feelings without getting carried away by them. And the great thing is, we can practice it anytime, anywhere, like while we're eating, walking, even standing in those crazy long lines at the grocery store,
So instead of scrolling through my phone while I'm waiting for the bus, I could try to be more present, notice the sounds around me, the people, maybe even take a few deep breaths.
Exactly. It's about bringing our attention to the here and now, even if it's just for a few seconds at a time. And over time, those little moments, they can really add up and change how we experience things.
It's like hitting the pause button on that autopilot setting in our minds.
Right. And speaking of hitting reset, what about those breathing exercises? They always seem so simple, but effective. Do you have a go-to technique?
We talked about the 4-7-8 one earlier. Is that one you recommend?
Oh, that's a classic for a reason. Super easy to remember and really effective. But honestly, there are so many others out there, like box breathing, alternate nostril breathing. Even just taking a few slow, deep breaths can make a world of difference.
It really is amazing how something as simple as breathing can have such a huge impact on how we feel.
Well, think about it. Our breath is directly connected to our nervous system, right?
Mm-hmm.
So when we're stressed out, our breath gets all shallow and rapid. It's like our body's alarm bells are going off. But when we consciously slow down and deepen our breath, We're sending a signal to our nervous system that everything is okay. It can relax.
It's like we're speaking our body's language, telling it to chill out.
Exactly. And the best part, it's a tool we carry with us everywhere we go.
That's so true. Okay, so we've talked about calming the body with our breath, but what about when our thoughts are racing? That's where this reframing negative thoughts technique comes in, right?
Yes.
It sounds powerful, but I have to admit, it's a bit fuzzy for me. How does that actually work?
Okay, so reframing, it's about noticing those automatic negative thoughts that pop up. You know the ones, I'm going to fail, they don't like me, this will never work, that kind of thing.
No, I know those thoughts all too well. It's
Yeah,
like they're on repeat sometimes.
exactly. But here's the thing. We don't have to believe every thought that pops into our heads, right? Reframing is about consciously choosing to see things from a more positive perspective, or at least a more neutral one.
So instead of telling myself, I'm going to completely mess up this presentation, I could reframe it as, okay, I'm a little nervous, but I prepared, and I'm just going to do my best, like that.
Yes, exactly. Doesn't mean you're denying the nervousness. It's more about shifting your focus to the things you can control, like your preparation, your intention to do well.
It's like being your own cheerleader instead of your own worst critic, which I am sometimes, I'll admit.
I love that. And it's so true. We often talk to ourselves in ways that we would never dream of speaking to someone we care about.
Mm.
Reframing is about extending that same kindness and compassion to ourselves.
It's not about pretending everything is perfect. It's about changing that inner voice from harsh self-criticism to something more compassionate and understanding.
Beautifully said. It's about recognizing that we're all works in progress, right? We're learning, we're growing, and yeah, we're going to make mistakes along the way. And that's more than okay. It's part of the process.
It's about embracing those imperfections, those moments when we stumble and seeing them as part of the journey.
Exactly. Now, all these techniques, they sound great in theory, right? But what about those times when our emotions feel really overwhelming? When that first arrow hits and we feel ourselves about to react, what do we do then?
That's the real test, isn't it? When those old habits of reacting impulsively come up.
Those are the moments when these practices become even more important,
Hmm.
because when we're triggered, our default reactions, they tend to take over. But if we've been practicing mindfulness, if we know how to use our breath, and we've been working on reframing those negative thoughts, we're much more likely to have the presence of mind to choose a different response.
So it's like having this toolkit of techniques we can use when things get tough. But what if we still, mess up sometimes? What if we react impulsively, say something we regret, or just let our emotions get the best of us? What then?
That's okay. It happens. We're all human. We all make mistakes, and that's just part of the process.
It's not about being perfect. It's about progress.
Exactly. Every day is a new opportunity to practice, to learn, and to grow. It's about noticing those moments when we slip back into old habits, and instead of beating ourselves up about it, we just offer ourselves some grace and compassion.
It's good to be reminded that it's not about being perfect. It's more about recognizing that we're all learning as we go. And those moments when we slip up, they're actually opportunities to course correct.
I love that. Seeing those slip-ups as chances to learn. It's like, when you're first learning to ride a bike, you're going to fall off a few times. It's inevitable.
Yeah.
But each time you get back on, you're building those skills, your
Yeah.
balance, your
Mm.
confidence.
And eventually you're riding along without even thinking about it,
All right.
right? Which actually makes me think, if this idea of not reacting can be so powerful on a personal level, what could it do for us, on a larger scale, like for society as a whole?
Yeah. Well, now that's an interesting question. Just imagine if we could apply these same principles,
Mm.
awareness, choice, not reacting to the way we approach all these big issues we're facing, social issues, politics, even global conflicts.
Right. Instead of instantly going on the defense or jumping into attack mode, what if we all took a moment to pause, to really listen with the aim of understanding instead of just waiting to respond, to find common ground instead of focusing on our differences?
It's a radical idea, isn't it? To approach these issues that are often so emotionally charged with curiosity instead of judgment, to genuinely try to understand perspectives that are different from our own.
It would require a huge shift in our thinking, wouldn't it? From us versus them to more of a, hey, we're all in this together kind of mindset. But can you imagine what might be possible if we could actually pull that off?
It's a beautiful thought, and it all starts with each of us, cultivating that inner peace, that sense of awareness. The more grounded we are within ourselves, the less we're going to react to all the chaos happening around us.
And the more likely we are to respond to those challenges with wisdom, compassion, and a genuine desire to understand and connect. It's like what started as a deep dive into this idea of not reacting has actually turned into a much bigger conversation about how we show up in the world, both as individuals and as a society.
It really highlights that connection between our inner world and the outside world, doesn't it? How cultivating that inner peace and awareness can actually have a ripple effect, influencing how we interact with others
Yeah.
and even how we approach these really big, complex challenges.
It's a powerful reminder that change starts from within, right? Every time we make that conscious choice to pause, to take a breath, to respond thoughtfully, we're contributing to a more peaceful and compassionate world.
Absolutely. And what could be more important than that?
So true. Well, there you have it, a deep dive into the power of not reacting. We started with this simple idea, and it's led us to some pretty profound possibilities for personal transformation and even maybe for creating positive change in the world around us.
It's been fascinating exploring all this with you.
A huge thank you to you for sharing your insights, and of course, to you, our listeners, for joining us on this deep dive. As we wrap up, here's something to think about. What if the most radical thing we can do in a world obsessed with speed and reactivity is to simply slow down, to pay attention, to make conscious choices about how we respond? Something to ponder. Thanks for joining us.